Okay, welcome back, and I have a couple new meshes here. Now, I'm going to use this one probably at a later time. I'm going to delete it for now. We're in the Dungeon 3 map, and I have this thing here. Now, I'd like to use this in my dungeon entrance blueprint. So if I go to Blueprints, Checkpoint, and open it's called a map entrance, actually. I'm kind of using dungeon entrance and map entrance as interchangeable. But I'm going to take this checkpoint mesh and swap it out. I'm going to search for dungeon entrance and use dungeon entrance stair. Now this is quite a bigger mesh. Now I need to move this so that it's at the correct level relative to the capsule component. Now the capsule is pointed that way to the left as indicated by the arrow component. So I'm going to need to rotate this mesh 90 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I can just position it. I can move it around. Now, if this is used as a player start and something is spawned at the location of this actor, it will be spawned at the location of the capsule component. So always keep that in mind. Now I'm going to go to Right View and just take note of where the capsule ends. It's just above this line here. So I can go ahead and move my mesh down to where it's at that point on that line, at least where I want it to be relative to the ground. And I'm going to turn snapping off for this and move it down slightly. But I'm going to tweak this once I have one in my level. So I'm going to bring one in. Now this is designed to have 2 3x3 grids worth of space on the floor. So if I go ahead and remove this, I can see I have a 3x3 and a 3x3 just missing from the floor. And I'm going to bring in my map entrance here. Now it's going to need to come down. And if I hit the end key, it'll snap down to the floor like this according to that capsule, which is the root component for it. But I'm also going to need to position it. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it and move it into place with snapping enabled so that it's taking up the correct location here. And just closely inspect it and make sure that we don't have any issues. Like right here, I think I can move it down a bit more. And I'd like to do that undocked, like so. Now I have snapping enabled again. So I'm going to need to turn that off. So I'll just move it down to where it's basically touching the floor, looking correct. And I do want to be sure that I can run down into it. I can. Okay. So I can highlight it as well. Now, of course, that means it's only going to highlight according to the whole mesh. So that's something to be aware of. I'm noticing a geometric inconsistency here, so I'm going to just move this a little bit without snapping. At this point, we're kind of tweaking. Okay, just filling in those gaps. And it looks like I could move it over this way as well, just so we don't have too much geometry sticking through. And if it does end up being a problem, we can scale this whole mesh. I can select that checkpoint mesh and slightly scale it in a bit. And if I really wanted to do that for all map entrances with this mesh, I could just come into the blueprint and scale it here. And that might be a better idea. So I'm going to scale it in slightly. Make sure it looks good out here. Save all. And take a look. So we have the outline effect, but of course, it's outlining the whole thing, including parts of it we can't see, so that's something to be aware of. But one thing I can do is I can add some components that will add to the highlight effect. Now, before I go and do all that, I want to make sure that my move to component and my sphere are at a good location. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that's the case. I'm going to move them down to the bottom of the stairs. I'd like my character to move down into the staircase towards the bottom of it. So I'm going to move those all the way inside down here. And here in my world, I'm going to press P and take a look at the nav mesh and make sure that the nav mesh can get down there. So it's looking like it might be having some trouble. So what I'm going to do is go to my checkpoint mesh. I'm going to browse to it, open it up here, and just take a look at its collision and make sure there isn't anything blocking the way. It's kind of a lot of collision here. And there isn't really a whole lot needed as far as collision. Some of this stuff can be removed. These collision volumes back here are completely unnecessary. They can be removed. As by the time our character gets down in here, they're auto running. Now, this part right here could use a little bit of help. I'm actually not even sure what I'm looking at. If I bring it up, then I can see what it is. I think I'm going to remove that part. This is a ramp, so I can keep that where it is. But I need to make sure it goes down enough. So to figure that out, I can make sure to delete any of these collision volumes I don't need. And what might be a good idea is to remove one of those ramps and take the remaining one and scale it appropriately. So just making it longer and then bringing it back down. And then I can bring it in. I can save that. If I bring it up, I can see that it looks like my nav mesh is affected by the floor. Look at that. So that tells me it's probably my bounds volume not going low enough. Sure enough, that was it. Now, I do need to make sure there are no gaps here, so this piece can go down in a little more and just up a bit. I just want to make sure that there's something to step up onto, right? Okay. And I might want my mesh moved down just a slight bit. So with my checkpoint mesh selected, we can go down just a bit, making sure not to make it look bad. Okay, we can try to walk down that. Yep, looks like I'm able to walk down it just fine. And if I can auto run to it, if I click on it, then I get taken all the way down and it transitioned me. Now, that's the intro screen because if I take a look at my destination map, I didn't set it because I brought in a new one. So I'm going to have to set the destination map. We can set it to Dungeon 2 since we're in Dungeon 3. And how about Dungeon 2, player start 1? I don't remember if I have one with that tag, but let's just test it out. Yeah, so it looks like it took me there. So it's operational, it works. Now, before wrapping up, I'd like just an extra little bit of effect when I hover over because we're not getting that full outline as the mesh itself is larger than what we see here, so we can't really see the full extent of the outline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my map entrance, I'm going to compile and save it, and go ahead and create a child blueprint class based on this map entrance, and just call this BP underscore dungeon stair. And for dungeon stair, I'd like a couple of point lights on here. So I'm going to add a point light. And the first point light I'm going to attach to my sphere, so it's at that location if I zero out its location. And I'm going to give it a nice golden color. Golden yellow. And bring its intensity up all the way. Now I'm going to right-click on this dungeon entrance and replace with my dungeon stair. Now I see that light. Now, in the game, it's noticeable, but I could use another light as well. So I'm going to take my sphere, select it, and add another point light to it, but move this second point light. I'm going to move it up a bit. Now this one is also going to get the same color and the same intensity, nice and bright. And I'd like to show this light, I'd like to turn this light on when hovering over this. So for the dungeon stair, I'm going to take my 2 point lights. I'm going to call them point light 1 and point light 2. And I'm going to right-click, type highlight, and we have event highlight and event unhighlight. And these are Blueprint native events, which means if we're going to implement them here, we need to right-click and add a call to the parent function as important things happen in the parent call. So we're going to go ahead and add that parent call. This gives us the C++ hovering capabilities as well. But now we can enable and disable these 2 lights. We can take them, we can set their visibility. When we highlight, we can set visibility to true. We can do this for point lights 1 and 2. And for unhighlighting, we can set that visibility to false for both point lights 1 and 2. And we can take their visibility and set those to default false for both. So now we don't see anything. Let's save all and let's try to highlight this. And now we get that light when highlighting. And if you don't want that outline for this particular mesh, maybe you're thinking, oh, the outline doesn't work for this mesh. Doesn't look so good, you could skip that parent call, because what is the parent call doing? Just to remind ourselves, let's look. The highlight is setting the render custom depth. So all we're doing there is showing the outline, and the map entrance is not much different, right? It just leaves that Boolean out of the equation. So if you wanted to, you could totally skip the parent call and not get that outline and just get the point lights. That's totally fine if that's what you'd like instead. And so, you know, you're venturing through the dungeon, you see this, you click on it, all of a sudden we go down into it. So now that we have a dungeon entrance that lights up when we're going down it, that's looking great. And it's functional, it takes us to another level. It looks good. This is looking really nice. All right, excellent. I'll see you in the next video.